Doc, I'm sure you have people that come and sit down. Do you have a couch?
I don't.
You don't have a couch. My kind of guy.
I have a computer screen.
Keeps them from sleeping on you, right? So, I mean, man, the statistics right now are just absolutely staggering when it comes to dealing with issues with mental health and anxiety, fear, depression, all of these intrusive thoughts and things like that. Why do you think that they're so much more prevalent right now than they have been in the past? Or were they just undiagnosed?
Well, that's $1 million question, right? I mean, what's the sad reality, like you mentioned, is it is on the rise. The latest stats that I looked at was 26% of adult Americans at any given time in this year, can be diagnosed with a mental health condition. And the greater, the sad reality is this, the stats are the same in the church. So my personal opinion on, everybody's trying to figure out what's the cause, is it diet, is it this, is it culture, in my opinion, I think that there's so much fluidity in every area of our life these days. I mean, there's nothing constant in terms of politics, in terms of gender, in terms of family, even finances and economy. I think that's, a contributing factor for sure. And the truth of the matter is that we need to be grounded in something. We need to be anchored in something that's not changing.
Yes.
Right? And as believers, we know that that's the Word of God, right? The Word is never going to change. God is never going to change. The verse of the day yesterday was Jesus is the same today, yesterday, and forever, right? And that's the truth. And I think, we've deviated from that, and we're focused on everything else that's going on. So I think that's part of it. So.
I have a lot of family in the military. I have a lot of friends in the military. One of the things that they always talks about is, you have to be able, why things are so different right now around the world is you don't know who you're fighting. Before you knew who you were fighting, right? I mean, two countries lined up across from each other. You had a Cold War standoff. Everybody had their finger on a button. But now you don't know who you're fighting, and that's what makes it difficult. At the same time, sometimes I feel like we go through some of these things, and we don't understand what we're fighting. And so we lose the battle sometimes purely because we don't know who our enemy is, and we don't know what weapon to use to get there. Talk to me about some of these things like anxiety or depression or intrusive thoughts. Can you help us understand, first of all, how do we identify what those things are? And, what are some of the things that cause those to manifest in our lives?
Absolutely. First of all, I just want to say that I'm a psychiatrist, not a psychologist, but we treat mental disorders with medications and different types of things. But absolutely. I think defining what anxiety, depression, fear, and all these intrusive thoughts is really important to understand. So I'll start with anxiety. Anxiety is really it's a big umbrella. When we say anxiety disorder, there's a lot of different subcategories that fall underneath it, like phobias, there's specific fears, there's generalized anxiety, and there's OCD. The list goes on and on, but the main thing for anxiety is this constant worrying, excessive worrying. And clinically, the way we define it is if you've been dealing with these symptoms for greater than 6 months, and you're just constantly on edge, you're irritable, you constantly worry about things, even little things start to trigger you, that's what we would consider anxiety. Some people, for some folks, it manifests in panic attacks. And what that is listen, you're just sitting down, you're not thinking about anything, and all of a sudden you have this intense amount of fear come upon you. Your heart's beating fast, you're sweating, you feel like you can't breathe. So I think that's also what happens. Now, the flip coin of anxiety is depression, and a lot of times anxiety and depression, they go kind of hand in hand. From the medical point of view, it's, our understanding is, it's a hypothesis, but our understanding is that it's a chemical imbalance dealing with neurochemicals like serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. So those are the chemicals in the brain that kind of affect these things. So in depression, the way we define it clinically is you need to be, if you're consistently down or sad for 2 weeks or longer, and you have symptoms of not enjoying things. Maybe you were enjoying things before, but you don't enjoy things afterwards, like you don't get pleasure from watching TV or spending time with your family. You could see changes in your energy levels, changes in your sleep, where maybe you're sleeping more and you can't get out of bed, right? Or even in your appetite where you're not eating that much. So that's some of the things. Now, what we feel is sometimes guilt can cause those things too, like, guilt from the past, just being too hard on yourself. But that's how depression is. And then fear, clinically, it's kind of hard to tease apart fear and anxiety too much because they kind of go hand in hand. From what I was reading, fear is, it's basically the response that you have to like an immediate threat, right? So like if you're on a boat and you see a shark and you're in the water, you kind of start bugging out. That's fear.
Yeah.
Right? You go into flight or fight mode.
If you don't have that, there's something wrong.
Right, exactly.
Right.
There's something really wrong with you, right? And then anxiety is similar to fear, but it's prolonged periods of just being on edge, even when there's nothing really going on. And I think that's why there's a prolonged time of 6 months, because we all go through situational things, right? Life happens, and sometimes we get anxious, sometimes we feel down, but the problem is when it lingers for long periods of time, and when it happens when there's nothing really going on. So.
I find that so interesting because it's like, for me, did they show you all that video about the ropes course up there? It wasn't very nice. I just want to point that out. I love roller coasters, right? Because I'm strapped in. And man, the exhilaration of a roller coaster does something for me, man. I absolutely love that adrenaline rush, that feeling in your stomach. But put me on a stack ladder on the 3rd story of this building with the wind blowing and feeling that thing bow and nothing pulling me into it, nothing holding me there. And I cling like a cat in a tree.
Right.
Is that anxiety? Is that fear? Or is that just I'm a normal guy who just doesn't like to be up high?
I think a little bit of both.
Okay.
A little bit of both. I won't diagnose you unless I get paid for it. So,
So what you're telling everybody is the pastor is not broken. He just doesn't like to be.
Your pastor's good.
That's
really
right. All right. So tell me this, man, because, okay, so we've talked about this, and the world will want to say, this is just part of your life, right? And so they'll want to help you. As Christians, and hear me say this to you today, because this is reality. Because you're a Christian doesn't mean you don't deal with things, you don't fight battles, and you don't have struggles. Okay? It doesn't make you any less of a Christian to go through certain things or to deal with certain battles in your life. But the difference is that we are Christians. Yeah. And so we're equipped with certain weapons that the world doesn't have. The fight's not fair for us. Right. The deck is stacked in our favor. Talk to me about some of that, because the world will try to diagnose things in one way, but we can diagnose things in a different way, knowing who the Holy Ghost is and what He has to do. So help me put those two things together.
Absolutely. So the Bible promises. I mean, God, Jesus said that we will have troubles in this world, right? And the prayer that He prayed for the disciples was, I'm not praying for you to be out of this world, but for you to be in this world, right? But you're right. The Word says that we're in this world, but we're not of this world anymore. So, what it comes down to is, although life happens to us and we deal with certain issues like anxiety and depression and losses and periods of grief and different issues, our approach needs to be a little different, right? Because we have this true and living God, right? We have a God that actually cares for us, that we could actually come to Him first. We call Him Abba, Father, right? And He's the source of all things. So, I think instead of going to like Google MD or going to Dr. Singh or going to, different places, I think that those are all good things. Seeking help is great. I think we all should seek help.
Agreed.
But I think the order in which we seek help is the main difference.
That's
right?
really good.
God, Yeah, and in the Word, there was times where folks did not consult God, they didn't seek Him out, right? And he responds and he says that, is there no God in this house of Israel that you need to go to these other gods, you need to go to this or that?
Yeah.
So I think the same thing comes with mental health as well. I think in every single thing we need to seek the kingdom first.
Yes.
Right, and that needs to be our ultimate thing. So. So basically, what that means is we need to really shift our thinking back to God. You know, because the truth is it's easier said than done. You know, when you're going through something, you know, you're really focused on your emotions. You know, if something bad happens at work, you're constantly thinking about that, and you're not really, you know, you're not necessarily thinking about, oh, let me pull out my card and think about the promises of God. No, you're constantly worried, you're constantly thinking about these things, but there's a very active effort that you have to take, you know, to go back and focus yourself on God.
Yeah.